All right, my friends, in this video, we're going to try to answer a very simple question. What is a microservice? To answer this question, we're first going to do a quick review on how you are probably building servers right now. So right now, you are probably familiar with a monolithic architecture. This is probably how you are building servers right now. In a monolithic server, we have all of our code needed to implement our application inside of one single codebase, and we deploy that codebase as one discrete unit. So we might imagine that with a monolithic server, we have some request coming from a user's browser or mobile device that will flow into our application and go through maybe some pre-processing middleware. Then maybe it goes off to some router. That router might then inspect the request and decide to send it off to some very specific feature to be further processed. So maybe in this case, it goes off to feature A, and feature A might decide to read or write some data out of a database, eventually formulate a response, and then send a response back to whoever made the request. So if we had to characterize a monolithic server, we might say the following. We might summarize it with this sentence right here. We would say that a monolith contains all the routing, all the middlewares, all the business logic, and all the database access code required to implement all features of our application. So that would characterize a monolith. Let's now take this diagram right here. We're going to make one or two changes to it, and that will then summarize or characterize what microservices are all about. So here's how we would characterize microservices. We would say that a single microservice contains all of the routing, all the middlewares, all the business logic, and database access required to implement one feature of our application. That is the big difference. So a monolith has all the code needed to implement every feature of our application. A microservice has all the code needed to implement just one feature. So let's take a look at this in a more kind of visual format. All right, I know this diagram is a little bit crazy, but it's very similar to the one we were looking at just a moment ago. So with this microservice architecture, we've now split off all these different features and wrapped them up inside of their own little personalized services. The very important thing here to understand is that each of these services are entirely self-contained. So service A right here has all of the code required to make feature A work correctly. It has its own middleware, it's got its own router, and it even over here, kind of surprisingly, will have its own database as well. The nice thing about this approach is that if for some reason, if every other feature or every other service inside our application crashes or just mysteriously disappears, a portion of our app is still going to work just fine. Because service A is 100% standalone and doesn't necessarily require any other service to work correctly. All right, so that is a very basic kind of introduction to answering this question of what is a microservice. Our working definition for right now is going to be that a microservice contains all of the code required to make one feature work correctly. Now that we've got a working definition, we're going to take a quick pause right here and continue in just a moment.